Thank you very much, and it's again the pleasure to have the opportunity to present the part of the results of our project today. And the task for me and maybe for us, for you as an audience, is a little bit different, since I will try to present this multi-layer visions, which means that this is not the presentation. Presentation is not based on just on the one types of flow, as it was yesterday, as migration, tourist, trade, FDI, but rather to go through all of them and to try to find some maybe general conclusions, maybe even not yet conclusions, maybe hypotheses concerning several issues. So I'm not going to tell a lot about the methodology, because this is based on the methodology of particular types of flows, which was presented yesterday. But I would rather want to go through the results with some questions. The question about the core and peripheries in Europe, maybe the picture is a little bit different than when we use the traditional indicators. And the vulnerability, which is the key point, at least now, during last 1 or 2 years. And then also distance, the role of distance friction, the dynamics. And that's at the end, that will bring me to the some suggestions, or maybe some conclusions for the future of European integration. So starting from very briefly from the methodology, why we decide, why in such a project we were trying to put everything together and create some synthetic measure, which is always challenging. Simply because we want to have a general picture, and we want to have a possibility to find the position of the particular region in the general, widely speaking, space of flows, which could allow us to have an alternative picture of the European territorial differences. And that's also the possibility to recognize what is the particular region's exposure for the external risk, different kind of external risk, which are, I would say, coming to the regions, coming to countries through flows and through different type of flows. So in addition, it could be, in our opinion, also the basis for the I would say, new generation of territorial policy, and maybe the future of the European cohesion policy. But this is, as I said, rather hypothesis, and something which could be the base for the discussion even today. In general, to simplify the picture, as you know that a lot of different flows were analyzed, we divide them for the 3 so-called basket, which is the economic one, it's goods, services, capital, then another which is more people, social basket, concerning migration, commuting, tourism and air passengers, and finally this knowledge basket with patents. It was possible to Carlos presented yesterday, and Horizon 2020 projects, as well as Erasmus flows of students. And on the other hand, we also analyzed some sub group of the regions, which just to compare the situation in a different types of the region by traditional ESPON typologies, as urban, rural, but also by macro regions as Baltic Europe, Danube Europe, and generally the position in the cohesion policy, I mean the regions which are developed, less developed, in transition, as it is later on used in the rules of the cohesion policy, as well as the how long is the particular region is, or the country, of course, the member of the EU. Okay, so let's start with these core peripheries. And we have probably in mind the picture of the blue banana or European Pentagon with some core of the Union and of the ESPON space, because we have to remember that this is not just the European Union. Of course, the UK, it was still an important part of that analysis. And we could see that the division is for the in general for the so-called all member states and the East Central Europe together with Greece, where in general we do not have this strongest connection. This is already the synthetic picture. And what I'm going to present is the synthetic picture for all, in all cases, for all different kinds of flows. So please remember that migration as well as trade, everything is included. So this is some, I would say, artificial picture, but that is done to show how much the particular places are connected to another in different kind of interactions. So we could recognize that this space of flows and the European space of flows is based mainly on the some most important nodes, and some of them are mainly the financial centers, the biggest metropolitan areas. Some other are more peripheral, but still important, as Stockholm and Madrid. If we look at the same problem from the point of view of the general intensity, this is the map, upper map, where there's an intensity, which means the participation of the particular region in space of flows, already not from the point of view of interaction, but already from the point of view of regions. And then we could recognize that this core of Europe is shifted a little bit to the north. That Scandinavian country, at least Denmark and southern Sweden, Norway, this is part of this core from the point of view of flows. Yeah? And southern Europe is less involved. And Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, it's the, of course, it is the main part of this. Of course, we could find some historical factor, and history still matters. At least if we look for the other map, where we can, when we were trying to show the very basic typology, where the intensity versus balance. And what is interesting that the picture, when we include balance, it's much more complicated. It's like a mosaic sometimes. So, but maybe it is the more realistic, and that shows that we have two different core periphery systems. One is pan-European, but we still have a lot of another such systems, which are the macro-regional or even country systems, and they overlap, both of them. And then we could find the places where even if the intensity is high, and even if from the point of the intensity they are in the core of Europe, but on the other hand, if we look at balance, it is not true. So the balance is negative. And on the other hand, on the peripheries, we have such places where the balance is positive. So that means this picture is much more complicated than on the upper maps. And we also, in some cases, I will also come back to the particular flows, and there are, of course, some of them where the spatial patterns are totally different, and Erasmus is students' flows is one of them. And for instance, here the southern and central Eastern Europe play a much bigger role than in the synthetic picture. Here we have the typology, or rather the clustering, based on the intensity, and it is quite clear because the majority of regions are in two categories. One of them is the number 3, which is the core of the European space of flows, and as I said before, it is rather more northern Europe this location is more northern than in traditional measure. And the other one, which is number 2, which there are the core, but both core and peripheral regions of southern and central Eastern Europe. So they are quite similar from that point of view, because that was just the typology and clustering, rather clustering, statistical clustering. There are, of course, some different types which are not similar to anyone, and this is Luxembourg as another separate cluster because of the intensity of the financial flows and FDI mainly. And there are also some port city regions. There is also some capital, but not all capital cities in the type 1, which is, for instance, Madrid, Vilnius, some other capital cities, but not all of them. And of course, please remember that important could be, at least if we are trying to find such a types of such a cluster as the capital cities, the size of the units. Sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's bigger, and that's influenced the picture, of course. What is also important and what we recognize as a positive results of our project, this is probably some of you remember such a map which is on the corner. This is the map from the paper of Professors Kunzmann and Wegener from 1991, when they proposed the polycentric Europe as an alternative for the European blue banana, and that was when already the enlargement was somewhere on the horizon. And that thesis was that it is necessary to support some metropolitan areas outside the core and to create the polycentric Europe. And if we look at the map of the clustering based on balance, we could recognize that it is probably successful, that Europe is on this periphery. It's based on such a, I would say, gateway cities, and it was also mentioned in a European spatial development perspective, and later in the next territorial agenda. And even if we are not successful from the point of view of general territorial differences and inequalities, probably we are rather successful from the point of view of this more polycentric and more balanced development. The analysis of flows, it's going on that I would say that direction, and we could find here such a places both in southern and central Eastern Europe, including Berlin, Warsaw, Bucharest, Madrid, Athens. So that's such a cities balancing the development of the I would say the islands of the higher flows intensity. Such a cities as similar one to another. Okay, that brings me to the next point, which is the vulnerability, and probably one of the most important now. And if we are talking about the vulnerability, this is probably one of the most complicated map, because that shows on the basis of intensity the dominant flow. So what kind of flows, for the synthetic analysis we took 11 of them. What kind of flows is dominating? Which one is the most important for the particular region? So if we take the region A, so the connection, the outside connection are first of all based on. And as you can see, the picture is complicated. It is a little bit mosaic-like, but in the middle, in the core of Europe, especially in Germany and partly also Netherlands and Switzerland, these flows, this green color, which means these flows of knowledge, are the most important. So this is definitely the core of Europe from the point of view of knowledge, since we are we have to say that since our indicators are good, maybe yesterday we will discuss it, maybe there are other indicators, but from the point of view of flows of horizon patterns as well as Erasmus, this is the most important kind of flows. And then on the peripheries, the situation is different, and sometimes it is surprising a little bit. In southeastern Europe, which means mainly the Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and also Lithuania, it is definitely dominated by the people and migration flows. So this is the main way of the connection of such regions with the rest of ESPON space, the rest of Europe. On the other hand, in Poland, it is different, because this is the red color, which means the economic. But we could say that maybe it is not so different, because both cases it is based partly on the cheaper labor force, but in case of Poland, this cheaper labor force is rather used on site because of and that's it is visible on trade, intensive trade flows, and in case of Romania, it is rather the labor force who migrating to Western Europe. We could ask that kind of questions. So and here there is a coefficient of variation. This is also important, because of course dominant flow is it is nice, but maybe the another one is also very intensive. So here you can find the places where when the color is darker and the coefficient is higher. That means that such a region is connections, such a region's relation with outside Europe is based on a limited number of flows, or at least sometimes one really dominant flow. And this is the case of Romania. This is the case of the Croatia coast. In that case, it's probably tourism. Also southern Spain and southern Portugal, Greek islands. So that's are the places where the one type of connection is definitely dominating. But we have also looked at the concentration, I would say geographical concentration, because if we are talking about the vulnerability, if we are talking about the resilience, important are two of them. The number of partners and this geographical diversification of partners, it is also important. But same as the differentiation among the types of flows. So you could say that who is at risk? The risk is the region where the one flow is dominating, and also the one partner or the partners from one country is dominating. So they are in such a case, we could say we have the double exposure to external threats. So the concentration, it is also important, and the concentration, this is a synthetic measure. Yesterday we were talking about the concentration in case of migration, but this is the synthetic picture, and the green color, it's generally better. Yeah? Intensive green color means that the connections are intensive and diversified. The red color means that they are not so diversified. Yellow is in between, and of course we could find the places, and in that case, that Spain, northern Italy, France, they are. We could say that it is the regions with the relatively lower risk from that point of view, because in general this pattern is quite diversified. Okay, we could also analyze it from the point of view of the of Brexit and UK dependency index, and here we could say that geography and distance matter. The regions located quite close to UK, I mean Ireland, as well as the coastal region of Belgium and the Netherlands, even France, they are mostly dependent on the connection, different types of flows with UK. On the other hand, some regions in Southern Europe. That's because of the migration, seasonal migration, tourism, and so on. Southern Spain, Crete, Cyprus. So they are definitely, let's say, dependent on the UK flows. But in Central Europe, this index is much lower, especially in Germany. And we could even say that for Central Eastern Europe, Germany is coming back to some classic literature, there are some intermediate opportunity. So that means that dependence on the UK connections are quite relatively low, except some islands, which are sometimes difficult to interpret, as some regions as Latvia, or some regions in Bulgaria, northern Poland, where the level of the intensity of connection to UK is high. But this picture is quite clear from that point of view. Okay, the next point is distance. Distance, it's not very surprising, because the dominance of the load average flow distance is in the middle of Europe, because simply the other regions are closer. So this is as I said, not very surprising. And on the other hand, we have those regions which are of the most peripheral location, including Cyprus, northern Norway, Iceland, and in that case, this average distance is definitely the highest. But what is, I think, interesting for us is the zone in between. There is a belt starting from southern France, northern Italy, through Slovenia, Austria, Czechia, Slovakia, Poland, Lithuania, and Denmark. So that's a kind of belt or ring, where we have rather the mosaic situation. And that means it is a kind of the inner peripheries, where we could see these overlaps of the flows on the European scales and on the regional scales. And in that case, it is also some point for the possible point for recommendation, which means that this is the zone where our policy probably could be more efficient, because even sometimes through the investment, through facilitating of transport system, it is possible to influence the distribution of this distribution of flows. And here on such a map, this is the let's say border effect, which means that the international versus domestic flows. So which kind of flows where they are dominating, and this is of course the question of the size of country, and in the bigger country, bigger and more peripheral country, they have higher rate of the internal and domestic flows. Coming to the dynamics, and on that map we could see the synthetic index of the dynamics of all flows, all 11 flows taken for the synthetic analysis. And as you can see, this is the map of the flows convergence. And the convergence of so-called new member states after 2004, it's clearly visible. And in addition, there are some other places as Portugal, Ireland, Iceland, as well as some Greek islands, even partly southern Italy, where this factor, this indicator of the flows intensity grow is the highest, and that means that the differences between European regions in terms of the participation on the space of flows are decreasing, and probably even decreasing maybe I should say not are decreasing, but were decreasing, because this is the period 2010-2018. So what's happened next, that is during the next presentation and our scenario analysis, what could happen next. But during that period, that was definitely the convergence from that point of view. Of course, it is also somehow the result of the low basis. This is clear. Okay, so to summarize and to talk a little bit about what that means for European integration. This is, as I said at the beginning, rather some hypotheses. Okay, so from some indicators, and at least such a dynamic indicators, they are I would say the evidence for the success of the European integration. This is dynamic, this is such an island and more polycentric development, and this is probably even more clear when we analyze flows than if we still base just on the traditional GDP and other similar indicators. So. But if we look at different types of flows, and when we start to compare it, that it is not so optimistic from that point of view, that this success is rather the economic success, because that's economic flows, mainly trade, but also freight transport. That's how that kind of interaction which were growing and where this integration is visible. Yeah. And from that point of view, from the economic point of view, you could say that regions in Germany, France, and Spain are taking into account the structure of the flows, and partly also intensity, are quite similar to those of Western Poland and Czechia. Yeah? So this is I would say the integration success. But even non-metropolitan regions were participated in the space of flows. I would say Castell's space of flows. But when we move to the other kinds, to other types of flows, I mean people and especially knowledge, this picture is not as optimistic, because the division into the core and periphery, it is much more visible. So we could say that social integration is in generally probably slower than economic. That's of course that's the hypothesis, but that could be one of the conclusion. Yeah, if we compare this with we have two main group of the priorities of the present territorial agenda of the Union, approved by German presidency two years ago, which is Just Europe and Green Europe. So when we are talking about Just Europe, so the development is definitely more balanced. So this flow changes, it's rather the evidence that we are going on the, I would say, right direction, yeah. On the other hand, it is important that there is overlapping system of flow imbalance between European regions. So they are different. Even if we are talking about the migration as it was a subject yesterday, so we could find that there is, in addition to the general distribution of flow, there is also it is sometimes visible that, say, the second layer, which is the flows between the big metropolises. And the flows between big metropolises are different kind, a little bit different structure, and the rest has the rules are a little bit different. Definitely there is an importance of functional regions. Functional regions is one of the priorities of territorial agenda, and I would say that in many cases it is visible if we check such a situation as Berlin, Prague, Budapest. So usually on those places where the NUTS border are and on such a way the limitation is on such a way that we have the two parts of the metropolitan areas, so we could find the difference between them based on the suburbanization process, commuting, but also by growing on the basis of the surrounding area. So that is definitely the point for the development policy based on the functional regions, not just on the administrative unit as it is. And integration beyond borders remains a challenge, and of course COVID, it was a point where the big question mark we could say was developed because of this. And however, everywhere when the political borders are visible on the map, that means that the structure and the intensity of flows is different on both sides. It is rather the negative conclusions from the point of view of this priority. And the Green Europe, probably we are not the conclusion for the period 2010-2018. It is that we are not moving towards sustainable connection, since we are promoting the Green Europe, so we should move from the air connection to rail connection. This is the comparison. Yesterday, Björn showed us this picture, but this comparison is very characteristic, where the air passenger is, everything is, I would say everything is together, and all regions are connected one to another all over Europe. When we look at the rail passenger flows, then the national systems are very separate. National systems are clearly visible. Even France and Germany is divided a little bit. The border is still visible there. And there is also another point when we analyze the dynamics, that in the dynamics of on the period 2010-2018, dynamics of air passenger flows was higher than the dynamics of tourism, which means that we are, and at the beginning of that period it was opposite. So that means that air passenger traffic grow faster than tourism, and that means that our tourism is less sustainable than at the beginning of this period. And the final slide with some very general conclusions. So that one of them is that there are still some historical factors, as I said at the beginning, and they could shape the position in the space of flows, which is maybe not so easy to find at the beginning, but there are some places with the very clear factors of that kind, as Cyprus and Malta, and the connection of Cyprus and Malta. I would say the colonial past is the factor, but also some region in Central Eastern Europe, especially the countries where the, I would say, state affiliation changed several times in the past 200 years, as Poland and Romania, and different direction of flows are still visible. So the point is that history matter from that point of view. I don't know is it good or not, but it is still the case. And of course, such a evidence could help us to formulate a new regional development strategies, and probably the public intervention should favor the diversification of regions' external relation. And but we have to be very careful, because this exposure, the resilience of region in relation to flows, of course, are very specific. So there is no one size, no one policy fits all for internal regional relation. But on the other hand, it is important, and at that point I could put the final question. Maybe the objects of cohesion policy could be both, not just regions, nodes of relation, treated as nodes of relation, but also relation themselves. so which means pairs of region. Maybe this is something which we have to start to think about. Thank you, and muchas gracias por su atención.
¿Alguien quiere hacer alguna pregunta? Okay, so
Any questions?